Hey y'all, I'm Allison Asarch from Nashville, Tennessee.
Hey, I'm Sean Fraser from the Ritzy Kids.
Hunters, this is Johnny from Rail Motor.
Hey, it's Shane from Blind Season.
Hey, it's Rob Stanier, and you can check out my music on all the streaming platforms.
Check out my latest music on all the streaming sites.
Check out my debut album on all streaming platforms.
Check out our new debut album.
Check us out on Spotify and Apple Music. And you're listening to our friends, Braggy and Curly.
My favorite bands from Australia.
My two favourite podcasters,
Braggy and Curly.
Braggy and Curly.
On the
Unfiltered and Undiscovered podcast.
Hey there, everyone, and welcome to episode 110 of the Unfiltered and Undiscovered podcast. We are going to get straight into it tonight. We're hard on a deadline because, of course, we're recording on the night that Queensland hopefully get the clean sweep in Origin. So we have a very upset Blue in the corner there, but hopefully with a little bit of luck.
I'd forgotten it was on.
Oh, bullshit, Rossi.
Now, I of course, I welcome Braggy from Adelaide, and we've got Rossi from Sydney, but we've also got a very special guest who is connected. We were connected to this guest from our very own country music correspondent, the Big Stew.
Oh.
And a big shout out to Big Stew and Swingo. And our guest tonight is Brendan Radford. Now, Brendan is a very humble sort of a guy when you go searching the net for some of his bio, but he's played with some amazing Australian and international artists, producing, directing, you name it. This guy has seen the music industry from so many different sides. Welcome to the podcast, Brendan.
Thanks, Curly. Thank you very much for having me on tonight.
No
And
worries.
another Queensland, so it's 3-1 Queensland versus New South Wales. Is that right? Because even though Brendan, I'm in Adelaide, I'm actually a Queenslander. So.
Oh, righto. Okay.
Yeah.
No, definitely Queenslander here. Yep.
I
lived in Brisbane most of my life, but yeah, in Quilpie for a couple of years as a kid, and Mount Isa for a couple of years, and my mum and dad are both from Queensland, one from Cunnamulla and one from Gayndah. So yeah, definitely born and bred, dyed in the wool.
No, those
Absolutely.
places as well. I'm from up north, up in Townsville, so played out in Mount Isa quite a few times at places like that.
Excellent.
Love it.
Excellent.
So, Brendan, let's get the show on the road. Let's share with us a little bit about your journey through the music world. What started it off, and some of the big things that you've been up to, I guess.
Okay. Well, I guess working backwards, what did I just do today? I played on a track for Alan Caswell, who, the guy who wrote Prisoner. He's doing a bunch of riding down the coast with a friend of mine. And so I played on actually a couple of tracks, played on one, sang on one. And then there was one for a guy called Dean Perrott, who won a golden guitar at the awards this year for the Bush Ballad section. And actually I played on that as well. And we were doing some stuff I was out at Birdsville with John Williamson last Monday and Tuesday for the Big Red Bash. Just flew out and flew back. And pardon me. And I guess, going back from there where it started, I guess it kind of started around the kitchen table as a, 10-year-old or whatever. And my dad used to play what he used to call the box guitar, which, of course, is the acoustic guitar.
It's the Dreadnought,
and,
yeah.
And it was a Dreadnought, yeah. He had I think he had a couple of guitars over the years, but the one that he had bought brand new in 1969, I think, was a Yamaha Red Label, which I still have here.
Yeah.
My dad passed quite a few years ago, but I've got the old Yamaha there, and I get it out on the odd occasion and play it on things. But and that's sort of where it started, me just playing around the table, and Dad would play, guitar, and he used to stick a harmonica in a frame and play a bunch of old tunes, like the Irish Washerwoman and Click Go to Shears and different things. And Stone Outside Dan Murphy's Door, all these old tunes. And and he taught my uncle to play guitar. My mum came from, as I said, from Gayndah up in the North Burnett here in Queensland. And so we used to go up there as kids for holidays. Mum and Dad get a bit of a break, and my three sisters and I'd go up to my grandmother's, and my uncle stayed with, he was still living at home, and we just go and spend most of my holidays sitting around playing guitar, playing tunes, Golden Wildwood Flower and Old Spinning Wheel in the Parlour and Yellow Rose of Texas and Shadows tunes, and he played Chet Atkins records and all that kind of stuff. So that's where it started. Yeah, so that's where it's sort of
I guess that's like happens a lot in the country, isn't it? That's like your entertainment as well, I guess, isn't it? So everyone's sitting around having a sing.
Yeah, it sort of was. And I guess when I was about 14, I actually got to play one of those old hall gigs. He had a gig somewhere in between Gayndah and Mergen, I think, if I remember rightly. And I think it was him and a trumpet player and a drummer. That was the band, and they went along and they played all these Pride of Errands and Gypsy Taps and, Boston Two-Steps, I think, and at the middle of the night, they'd have a big break and they'd bring out the sweet and sour and the curry, whatever it was. And, and then they'd get back into it again, and I remember the drummer, he actually didn't hold a drum beat. He used to just play these weird things on the drums that were kind of in time with the music. It was all kind of really weird, but that was the country. That was their, I guess, entertainment. And it was the same when my dad was a policeman, and it was the same when we travelled around and lived in Quilpie and Mount Isa. And, when he had days off, we'd sit around and he'd have a beer and we'd sit at the table and he'd sing a few tunes, and that was kind of what you did, Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you started playing, and you got bands together, and then was that when you were where were you when that sort of first kicked off?
Yeah, so it is a bit of that old school thing, you get playing with music with guys at school. So I was probably in grade 8 or 9, I suppose, and we had a little school band together, and of course, playing in a band is a great way to meet girls. I was at an all-boys school, so it sounded like a good thing to do.
It's the only reason anyone does it.
And no one told us at that stage. What happened was you stay on stage and everyone else takes the girls away, and by the time you packed all your gear up, they're all gone home. So, anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But
if they stick around to when you pack the car up, they're keen.
Yeah.
Or you're in trouble, one or the other. Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Well, that's right. So it sort of started with that, and there was a fellow that was a year ahead of me, an Italian fellow, and he played a thing called the Cordavox, which was actually a piano accordion. Mm-hmm. Now, they had a couple of models of these. There was a later model that was a transistorized one, but the one he played, it was an old valve model. So every note on that piano accordion had a valve for it. So it had this crazy amplifier that had all these little valves in it, and there was a valve for every note. Him and his dad, Johnny, who was a trumpet and saxophone player, and a fellow who was playing drums, Greg Hanna, who still lives here in Brisbane. He was a student of the great Harry Lebler back in the day. Lots of people have learnt from Harry and gone off to Sydney and played with, Mitch Farmer was one of Harry's students, and he's played with Farnham and Tommy Emmanuel and all those guys. And I played on and off with Mitch for years in bands, and I book him for different things. But anyway, Greg was one of Harry's students, star students, and we were playing. They had gigs in like the Polish club and the Italian club and things like that. So what we would do is we'd go along and play all of these Latin American tunes, Quando Quando, and I can't think of them now, but all of those sort of tunes. And then as the night got on, the kids would get interested, and we'd end up playing covers of McCartney and Wings tunes and, Rolling Stones tunes and that kind of stuff. So, and I was still at school. I'd go out on a Saturday, Dad would drop me off, I'd do a gig, get paid a few bucks, get picked up, and, it was way better than standing outside a pub selling newspapers or something,
Yeah.
What a way that, like, Rossi, you'll agree with me. This what a way to learn all that old stuff first, and get all that under your belt. What a great platform, to go on.
Oh, I wish I'd paid more attention in those days. Really. I've said that to a lot of people. Because at the time, you're too cool for school, who wants to learn Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White, but seriously, the intricacy of some of that music is fantastic. And I go back now and think, how much better I'd be if I'd really paid attention. But anyway, what is.
All those old guys, like I remember coming through and working with those old guys, and you just be in awe of them. Yeah, like
Absolutely.
at first you're sort of like thinking, oh, geez, they're not doing much. Then you pay attention to what they're doing, and it just blows you away.
Yeah.
Like you talk to them, they say, "Oh, yeah, we used to do 4 sets, then we'd drive across town, do another 2."
Yep.
Yeah, and their work ethic was stellar. But they were just so casual, relaxed, and they'd walk into anything. You could throw almost anything at that sort of guys, and they'd just go, "Oh yeah, I've got that." And if they couldn't, they'd vamp it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
We're still,
absolutely.
Yes. Yeah,
That's
exactly right.
One of the worst misconceptions for the average punter is that country music is just 2 or 3 chords, man. Some of the greatest musos you've ever heard in your life, are in that genre, and I've just you know what I'm saying. It gets a bad rap.
I know what
sometimes.
you're saying, Bragg.
Yeah,
I know what you're saying, and it's interesting too. Because I have played lots of styles. I mean, but yeah, I guess the thing with, and there's lots of different genres within country music as well.
Of course,
you'll get people will say, I like country music. I had a really funny conversation with a fellow on a cruise ship a few years ago. As you do when you're on a cruise ship, you end up at the breakfast table or the dinner table with people. And this fellow said, oh, yeah, I got dragged along. It was horrible. And but anyway, I don't like country music. But anyway, I'll make the best of it. And then in the next breath, he said, but did you see that Daniel Thompson the other night? He was fantastic. Daniel Thompson did a Johnny Cash tribute show. The whole show was Johnny Cash tunes.
Yeah.
And this guy was saying, I hate country music, but I love Johnny Cash. Yeah. I mean, what do you do with that? That's crazy.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah.
So,
Well, we did see that you played with Mitch Farmer, and he's and I know he is a spectacular, stellar drummer. He's one of the gold standards, right? Like it ran.
Yeah, absolutely. Mitch is an amazing player. Yeah.
You worked with, I was reading that you worked a bit with Rose Carleo as well.
I did an album for Rose, actually. I recorded and produced an album for Rose.
That's a hell of a vocal there. That girl can
She's
sing.
a hell of a singer, you bet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She's still knocking around down in Sydney doing a bit of harder rock these days, I think.
Yeah, she sort of was always a bit more kind of bluesy.
Brassy.
The album that we did together was more like a country type record. And actually her and Alan Caswell wrote one of the tunes on there together. And she also, now she did a duet with, and the name just escapes me now, McAllister, with McAllister Kemp. So Drew McAllister and Rose did a duet on that album. Yeah.
Wow.
Which was really, really cool. We had so we recorded some of that up here in Brisbane, and we recorded some of that down on the Central Coast in Rod and Jeff McCormack's studio, Music Cellar. Yeah, yeah.
It's a really big industry though now. Like the country scene. Like you did the Big Red Bash on the weekend. Like they're doing big shows. All the CMT stuff. Or those shows are massive.
Yeah, but look, like Big Red Bash is not exclusively a country show, and I guess
the Gurus were there, weren't they? Or
the Gurus were there, Mental as Anything. But Troy Casadale was there. We had a funny picture on Facebook of us going out in the bus together. And Troy's a great mate of mine, Troy and Laurel. Actually, I knew Troy's wife Laurel before Troy met and Laurel met. And I was there that night that they kind of met. Yeah, that was up at the Gympie Muster. But it's got a big range of music. The first year I went to Big Red Bash, Paul Kelly was there as well, and a bunch of different people. It's a great music festival, and it's about the journey. As much as it is about the music and being there, it's about the journey. It's about the getting there and the getting home. And all those stories and those memories that people create. It's just, you just can't buy that stuff. It's fabulous.
It looks incredible. So we might talk about the logistics of the Red Bash as soon as we've done our first segment. So bear with me. I'm going to... you should not be forgetting it.
Well, let's just get into the conversation, Kelly.
I know. That's what we do.
mate, like I said before, when I was talking to you guys off air before, I said this is the best first line so far because Brendan, they always start with, I was born somewhere, but and you, Brendan, you very well might get this. I don't know, maybe if you're a music historian in your genre, you might. I was born in Bakersfield, California on April 6, 1937, in a boxcar that my father had remodeled for the family to live in after they had moved from Oklahoma, where their barn burnt down during the Great Depression. How's that for a start in life?
Wow.
Brilliant.
When I was 9, my father died of a brain hemorrhage, which deeply affected me and remained a pivotal event for the rest of my life. When I was 12, my older brother Lowell gave me his guitar. I learned to play it on my own with records I had at home. While my mother was out working during the day, I started getting into trouble and was sent to a juvenile detention centre for a weekend. But my behaviour didn't improve. If anything, it became worse. And by age 13, I was stealing and writing bad cheques. And in 1950, I was caught shoplifting and sent to the detention centre again. The following year, I jumped a freight train and ran away to Texas. Eventually, how good is it? Eventually returned to Bakersfield in the mid-50s, I decided to pursue a music career, playing in local bars at night and working as a farmhand or in the oil fields during the day. But I was still plagued by financial problems and eventually was caught and arrested trying to rob a roadhouse. I was subsequently convicted and sent to Bakersfield Jail, where I immediately tried to escape, was caught, and then transferred to San Quentin Prison. That's number one.
That's number one.
Who am I?
If you know it, Brendan, don't say it. You have to wait till the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got an idea?
You probably should have told me that first.
Okay.
What a life.
Absolutely. Hey, so Brendan, how does something like the Big Red Bash work? So I presume you fly in and then you bust in, and
yeah. Look, I mean, I've just been there as a player for an artist or two. So I've been out there 3 times. Been lucky enough to get out there 3 times. I mean, Greg's the fellow who organised it, and there's a whole history behind that with him, raising money and doing it as a charity. And
for
one of the
Royal
reasons
Flying
they had
Doctors,
Yeah. But one of the reasons they had Willow out there this year, and they like to get him back most years, is because he was on the very first one, and this year's was the 10th anniversary. So, I mean, those sorts of things, I guess, they're pretty hard to make money out of the first little while, but he's stuck with it, and it's just massive now, which is fabulous. But look, the logistics, they have to get all the staging and all of the sound reinforcement stuff out there. And I remember the first year I went, I think was 2016, 16 or 18. I just don't recall exactly. But I'd been asked to go out there and play with Adam Harvey. And I had my 4-wheel drive and my little camper trailer. And I said to Ad, look, mate, I actually wouldn't mind going for a bit of a trip out there, just driving out and back. And then he said, no worries, just I'll be there such and such and meet you there. So yeah, we made a trip of it. But it's like from Brisbane, it's a minimum of like a 3-day trip, really.
Really?
Wow.
I mean, I guess, could you make it in 2? Maybe. I mean, I've driven from Eulo to Brisbane in a day, but that's 11, 12-hour day.
Yeah.
So, and it's still a long way from there.
There's not much
through
to
Windora and so it's sort of, and I mean, we did a 3-week turnaround, but the second time and the third time I flew out, so it was just a fly out. This time was whirlwind, so we flew out Monday, left Monday morning, and did a bit of a milk run with Rex. We did Brisbane to Toowoomba, Well Camp, and then we did Charleville, and then we were supposed to do Quilpie and Windora and then Birdsville, but there was no one getting on or off in Quilpie and Windora, so we flew over and got into Birdsville an hour early. And then coming back it was just Birdsville, Charleville, Brisbane, and we got out Tuesday afternoon and we were back in Brisbane about 11 p.m. So it was, pretty quick.
Yeah.
Brendan, tell us about how going back to your musical sort of journey. When did the session sort of playing start to come about,
Yeah, I guess it's come and gone over the years a little bit. First sessions. Actually, the first sessions I probably did would have been in Brisbane, and they would have been vocal sessions.
Okay.
And I was actually really lucky to come through a time when there were lots of jingles. Jingles are kind of not so cool these days, but you still see the odd one. But
they're probably all AI generated now.
Yeah, that's right.
Will be.
Potentially,
they will be.
Yeah. Actually, I was listening to a podcast about bias in AI on the way home from the coast tonight.
Oh yeah,
it's pretty wild, some of the stuff. But anyway, we digress. So yeah, I did a lot of work for a studio called Sweet 16 in Brisbane.
Okay.
And they did lots and lots of jingles. So we did stuff ranging from Powers Brewing. You remember the Powers beer?
I do.
And Forex and Suncorp, Metway Bank, I think we did.
Cool.
There was just a country bake. There was, all these different things. So I got into session singing, and then I got to do a little bit of guitar playing, did some things on some different jingles, and then I did some things. One of the writers there, he was in with the advertising agency, Greville Patterson, and he had a bunch of songs he'd always wanted to record, and I got hired to play on that, and then as time went on, I ended up on just albums. There were albums up here for different people, some of who you've never heard of, you'll never hear again. There's lots of those. There's still lots of those. But in between that stuff, there was I through gigs, I ended up playing on Gina Jeffrey records. I ended up playing on Lee Kernigan records down in Sydney for Garth Porter, down at Rancom Studios. And most recently, I'm kind of at the moment. As a friend of mine owns quite a great studio down in on the Gold Coast, and I go down there and spend every Wednesday down there because he does everything from bush ballads through to stuff for Netflix. There's Hawaiian music, there's Mexican type, there's all sorts of styles. There's, we do all sorts of different things. So, and it's fun. I love inventing stuff. Yeah. It's fun. Yeah. So I really dig it. Just quietly, I'd do it for nothing, but don't tell anybody that.
that instrumental stuff you do, like that stuff where you're saying Netflix and stuff. I know someone who does it for Universal, and they sort of buy a lot of almost like stock footage, but stock audio. Yeah. And they on-sell that, and that's it's a revenue stream. As a musician, it's hard. You've got to make a quid somehow.
Well, and it is getting harder. I mean, I guess. As we were talking about me, playing in that Latin American band, well, that went on to being a band that started to play around clubs and pubs, and then I ended up in a band on the Carlton circuit. And at one point there, we were playing the Waterloo Hotel here in Brisbane. We were there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday every week, and we were doing City Plaza on Wednesdays. I think our band did it Wednesdays, and Keith Urban and his band Three Magic Words did it on Fridays. That was kind of what was going on in those days. But I mean, the days of a band doing 5 nights a week locally now, you might get a solo or a duo or something that might do that. But, we had a 4-piece, 5-piece bands doing that stuff, So I feel really lucky. Back to the session thing. So in Sweet 16, I got to meet a whole bunch of pretty amazing people. So there were people like Peter Roberts, who was one of the singers out of Stylus. So Peter Couples and Peter Roberts both sing as Stylus.
Stylus.
And I learned so much about background vocals working with Peter Roberts. He's an amazing singer. Yeah, he's no longer with us anymore. He was an incredible singer.
And he was
very strong. I think from Melbourne, but he moved up and he was living up in Mullaney. And he was a lovely, lovely man and great teacher. And I learnt Greg Doolan out of Wickety Wack. He used to come in and do a bunch of sessions. He had a voice as big as a house. And, and I remember doing
Queensland
stuff with Roy Postlethwaite, who used to do the theatre stuff in Brisbane. Susie McKenzie, who's been on Home and Away and different things, and her husband was a guitar player for Shania Twain for a while. So they're in Sydney, and so Susie was always on sessions. Robbie McKelvey, who's now Robbie Kernigan, Lee's wife. I actually they'll argue the point, but actually I think I introduced them down at Sanctuary Cove.
You're a matchmaker, Brendan.
The first gig I did with Lee was down at Sanctuary Cove to 40 Japanese businessmen from Toyota who didn't speak a word of English.
Yeah.
Says a bit about Australian players, because I know a couple of people have gone and played for Shania Twain. A couple of Aussie blokes, just pub musicians, and they've gotten over there and she just rates them.
Yeah,
and those guys are the guy, what's his name? He used to be in Avion. What's his name? Can't remember. And another guy, Andy Chacon, who's a bass player. And those
I don't know
guys
Andy, but I know of him.
Andy played in Rose Tattoo at one stage, would you believe?
And probably with Tim Gaze, who also lives up
that's
here.
Right. Yeah, Tim's fantastic.
Yeah, one of my earliest influences used to play at the Castle Hotel at South Brisbane.
Tim's one of the best guitar players in the country.
I used to sneak in there as an underage person, just quietly, and watch Tim play. Listen to Tim play guitar. Me and I've got a mutual friend who's a great guitar player in Brisbane, and we've played together. A guy called Dave Moon, and we both compare stories of going and watching Tim play. And amazing.
So those Australian guys go over there and they knock them down. Like you go to Nashville, and there's like 20-foot posters of Keith Urban in Nashville itself. Blows your mind. That's capital city, right? For that world. And Keith is as big a star as his wife is in Hollywood,
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And rightly so, because,
he's good. He's done the work.
Yeah. I can't say I know Keith well, but I know I've met Keith a few times. And, Keith just he really wanted it. He really wanted to do that. He'd made his mind up. The first time I saw him, I think, was down at the Waterloo Hotel, the Waterford Hotel, the old Riverview Hotel at Waterford, and he was there with a band called the Sunshine Band, and he was a 17-year-old kid, played out and stepped out and played Sultans of Swing note for note, and that was he was amazing. But he used to play. He was just he's in the regular pub bands around Brisbane. He was in Rusty Mares, Rockettes out at the Sunny Bank.
In Townsville, I think, in a cover band,
He was on the Hutchison Circuit band for a while.
Yep. Seaview Hotel or somewhere there in Townsville. Yeah.
But that's, you can't get much bigger than that,
Well, no, you can't. No,
it's mind blowing. I couldn't believe it when I arrived. And
you can't get much bigger than the Seaview Hotel. Is that what we're?
Of course.
That was unfortunate timing.
It was. Let's go to the second part of Who Am I, Braggy?
Hey, okay. Previously on Who Am I was in prison. Whilst in prison, I became friends with several death row inmates, and this prompted me to change my life. I soon earned the equivalent of a high school diploma and kept a steady job in the prison's textile plant. I also played in the prison's country music band. Upon my release in 1960, I was soon back performing. The Bakersfield sound was developing in the area as a response to the overproduced Nashville sound, and my early recordings were on Telly Records. My first record, Singing My Heart Out, was not a success, but in 1964, I was talked into visiting Liz Anderson, the mother of country singer Lynn Anderson, a woman I did not know. I went to her house to hear her sing some songs she had written. If there was anything I didn't want to do, it was sit around some dang woman's house and listen to her cute little songs. But I went anyway. She was pleasant enough, pretty, with a nice smile, but I was all set to be bored to death, and even more so when she got out the whole bunch of songs and went over to the old pump organ. And there they were. My God, one hit right after another. There must have been 4 or 5 number one songs there. I had my first top 10 hit with My Friends Are Gonna Be Strangers. Then in 1967, I recorded I'm a Lonesome Fugitive, also written by Anderson, which became my first number one. Now, I think Brendan might know it. Do you know, Rossi?
I think I do.
Okay, cool.
But I've got no idea.
But I wouldn't.
I've got no idea. So Brendan, one of the questions I've got, you're heavily involved in music, and a little birdie told me that you've been like the musical director for for Tamworth and other festivals around the place. What do you look for, I guess, for bands to be playing in those festivals or the larger ones like Tamworth?
So not for the whole Tamworth Festival, because if anyone who's been to Tamworth would know that there are, myriad sort of venues throughout all the town. But this has been for the Golden Guitar Awards, which I guess is kind of like the pinnacle of the Tamworth Festival.
It is. Really
so yeah, I've been the musical director for the Tamworth Golden Guitar Awards and the band leader for probably, I guess 7 or 8 years now.
Wow!
And before that, a great friend of mine, Rod McCormack, who is Gina Jeffries' husband, or Gina Jeffries is Rod McCormack's wife, whichever way you want to put it. Rod's an incredible multi-instrumentalist, actually, and he was the MD, and I used to play guitar for him in his band, and when he decided to step aside, he kind of passed the baton to me, and the CMAA, Country Music Association of Australia, were happy enough with that. So, and that's kind of how it's been, and I work with Peter Ross, the producer down there, on that awards show, along with a lot of other people. I just have a very small part in it. But what am I looking for when I book the band? Look, well, it's just people with experience. Often it's not so much these days, but when we started, we were kind of looking for people that played with some of the big stars that went on the show. So, I would be in the band, and I think at the time I was in Lee Kernighan's band, and Mitch Farmer was playing drums in Lee's band, and James Gillard, the bass player, was also playing in Lee's band. So there were, and we had all played in bands with lots of the people that were on. So myself and Mitch had played in Gina Jeffries' band, and as a result of that, you end up doing gigs with lots of people. So I over time toured with Troy Casadale and toured with Tanya Kernighan, and done a bunch of gigs over time with Melinda Snyder, and Catherine Britt was the support for Lee, so we had a little band for her, and so all those kinds of things. The McClymonts were actually on the support for Lee at one stage, and I ended up touring with the McClymonts, and that was a funny experience. It was just because they all play and sing, they just took myself on guitar and Scotty Hills on drums. Scotty lives down in Lismore, and Scotty's plays with Graham Connors and plays with Sarah Storer, and that was funny. We'd go and do a gig somewhere, and Brooke, Brooke and Adam have got their own thing happening now, but Brooke would be the boisterous one out on the stage and telling jokes, and she was the party girl, and then we'd all end up back at the motel, and they'd all go in and put their jammies on, and they put bread in the toaster and boil up and make a cup of tea, and, and get a nice early night because we got radio interviews in the morning. So the reality versus perception was, they're really serious about their craft and about their business, and you find that actually about a lot of people, that the persona doesn't always match the reality, because you'd kill yourself if it did,
Exactly. Yeah.
Very much so.
Like you're operating at a very like as humble as you are, you're operating at a pretty high level. Like you're dealing with the cream of the crop, from what it appears.
Well, I'm lucky. I'm really lucky to have been able to do that. But I don't know. You just sort of, I guess there's a bit of that. Jump in and paddle like mad with me, Yeah. We were talking before, we alluded to fake it till you make it. Yeah. I think in any walk of life, you've got to be prepared to get a bit out of your comfort zone, but not, sufficiently out of your comfort zone to grow, but not too far out that you scare the daylights out of yourself and don't go back,
Yes.
And so I guess I guess it was sort of a bit of timing as well. So if I think back, I'm playing covers gigs in bands, and I've had a couple of my own bands, and I'm in Brisbane, and then I go and do this gig out in Crow's Nest outside of Toowoomba, And there's this young girl, Gina Hillenberg, who's come along, and she's one of the guests. And she's Gina Jeffries, who's just won Star Maker in Tamworth. And the band I'm in, she likes the band, but she needs a pickup band up in southeast Queensland, because she's just starting to get some gigs.
Yeah.
The next thing she's got booked is the Warana Festival. She's got an appearance on there every day. And so she says, "Oh, can you come and play guitar for me at the Warana Festival?" That leads on to me. She says, "Can you come and be musical director for me in Sydney?" I say, "Well, no, I'm in Brisbane. I've got 5 kids. I don't want to move to Sydney." And a year later, she comes back and says, "Well, my gigs are paying a whole lot more money now. I don't need you to live in Sydney. Will you be my musical director, and I'll fly you down when I need you?" So yeah, cool. And it's just, and then you're bumping into, you fly into Emerald Airport to do the Emerald Country Music Festival, and as you walk through the airport, Lee Kernigan and his band are walking out of the airport because they've been on last night, and you go and do the bluegrass comp in Tamworth, and so I've won a few of those over the years. And, Troy Casadale, who's been busking out in the streets down in the audience, and he's like, "Man, I wish I could play like that." And now he, it's just sort of being there and being part of it. And, as I say, that little bit of get out of your comfort zone, that little bit of, but also you want it to be as good as it can be. So if
So Brendan, you spent all this time learning your craft and then making other people sound good. Let's move on now and let's talk about your stuff. Your songs, because I had a good listen today to your album Snow. Mate, that song for a start, I can almost hear the tears in your voice when you're singing it.
I don't get sick of singing Snow. So that song. So I mentioned before about going to Gayndah for holidays. That song's actually about my uncle, who played guitar, and I learned a lot of my early guitar from my uncle. And my uncle had schizophrenia, so he had this, and I grew up with this, so this is just normal to me. Just like, it's interesting, I think, when you grow up with people with mental illness, and lots of us have it in our families, I guess.
Yes. Yep.
But for me, it was like, oh, well, that person's like that, and that person, they're different, they're like that, and that person, they're different again, they're like that. And nothing's wrong. It's just how people are. So how he was on this cycle of, 12 months he'd be well, and then he'd say, "Oh, I'm well, I don't need to take medication anymore." And 6 months he'd spiral into this, turmoil, and he'd end up back in hospital, and they'd get him back in his meds. Then he'd be okay. He'd come out, he wouldn't be quite right, but he'd get right, and then he'd be 12 months, he'd be good, and then he'd no more meds, and then spiral. It was like over my entire growing up, it was like this guy that, was great most of the time, and then he didn't want to be around anyone, then he was great again, and it's just like, and that was him. That was my uncle, and I loved him, and we kind of idolized each other in a way. We just sort of because he's like my favorite uncle, and so that's what Snow's about. It's I can really feel the emotion when you're singing that one. And there's that line, I'm guessing, is about the schizophrenia, where someone came into your life, or someone came in. It's a bit of imagery, I guess. I'm just trying to say, well, someone's come in and let themselves in the door, and now they won't go away. Yeah. So it's kind of like, this is me, and then someone else has come in, and that's another me, and I just want that to go away and be just the one me, but I can't, because that won't, it's always there. So.
Yeah, I connected with that. I know someone else is with the same sort of deal. So I really, it was good.
Yeah.
Cotton wool baby, would have been easier with a better start. But you were on your way. Grew up on a dairy farm, never strayed too far from your mother's side, until your dying day. And you were the clever one, yeah, you could turn your hand to just about anything. Yeah, you were gonna go far, till the voices in your head told you life had other plans. Said you're staying right where you are. Hey Snow, are you gonna play that guitar all day? Or maybe go fishing up by Derraway? Yeah, we could go out in the yard and throw a cricket ball around. Maybe best go and have a lie down. When you were only 24, a stranger came knocking at your front door.
So there was that song. The other, I mean, there's a bunch of tunes on there, and some of them I didn't write. I did write a few of them. Stop the Night and What's Going On, and but the last track is Kangoola Station, and that's because that's where my dad grew up until he was sort of 13 or 14, and so he passed in 1994, and I'd always wanted to write a song about my dad to my dad, but it's just a bit, for me it was a bit hard, you know.
Yeah.
But then I don't know where the idea came from, but I thought, well, hang on, how about if I'm my dad and I'll just write a song and tell my story?
Yeah.
So that's what that is. So it's actually my dad singing, you know. So when they talk about a baby boy was born, that's actually me. You know, when I sing about that.
Great. Yeah, that's a great way.
So that's just where I went with that. Yeah. So I was joking to someone the other day. I've probably got another 2 albums worth of stuff pretty much written and half recorded, but you know, the hard work's not the writing and the recording. The hard work comes after that. You got to do something with it. I think it's getting even harder and harder these days, and so I guess that's why I've been hesitant to release anything else. But I'm on the cusp. I reckon I'm going to do something in the next few months. I've got to get something out there. So
with that, the country music correspondent Big Stu tells me you've got a song called "Flick the Finger."
Yeah, I haven't. I've only done a demo of that one at the moment, and I kind of thought it wasn't really something that I'd sing, but I don't know. I had a chat with my mate Pete Dennehy a few weeks ago, and I pitched it to Pete, and he came back and said, "Man," he said, "this is your song. This has got too much content in here that you relate to. You really need to do it yourself." So, so it came from driving out west, and we went. My wife and I last June, July, went for a trip up into the Gulf and up to Kakadu, and I just love travelling all over this country. I can't wait to be a grey nomad and go and do the lap, and I'm just, I'm into it. As a matter of fact, I have a new lifestyle camper showing up in September.
This show brought to you by
Swingo's kind of helped me out, although I had a little bit to do with designing it from kind of previous experience. But anyway, that song came from that, and I was just driving along, and I was sort of just northwest of Dalby or somewhere, and started to, you just lift the finger off the steering wheel, and no one's doing it back. And I just said to my wife, I said, "They don't flick the finger in the outback anymore." And I said, "Gee, that's not a bad title for a song," So the chorus went, "They don't flick the finger in the outback anymore. Maybe we're not west enough. I'm really not quite sure. I think it was more than courtesy. It's a little like bush law, but it seems they don't flick the finger in the outback anymore." But anyway, I've actually recorded a demo, and it's got a happy ending, and you're just going to have to wait around, and I'm going to record it myself in the next couple of months. So,
I'm just interested, Brendan. You're talking about you got a couple of albums worth of material. Do you find, because you've come all the way through the changes, there's been significant changes as a musician. Like we've gone from, you're working in pubs, you could work 5 nights a week, you could make a living out of that, you'd work, you've got a big family, all that sort of stuff. Then now we've come through, like radio backed people in selectively, people that have a go. Now we're in the streaming world. Do you find that now that it's not mediated, that there's so much material out there that everything kind of gets lost?
Yeah, I guess it does. It's certainly difficult, but I guess the upside of that is it gives so many more talented people the opportunity to get stuff out there. And I guess the other thing is you've just got to keep doing stuff, like you just got to keep doing stuff and hope that something connects and something sticks. And you come back to, why did I start doing this in the first place? And, sort of earning money out of it can be a bit of a bonus in a way, but if you don't love it, you're not going to keep doing it. So,
yeah,
but yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because you don't earn a lot of money from streaming unless you get lots and lots, like worldwide.
Unless you're Beyonce,
and stuff. Yeah, well, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
But like you said, it's catch-22. At the same time, the average Joe who would never had a chance to get into a studio and make a record can now just do it from his home and put it out there and be happy with that. Thing. Be happy. Yeah, it's a great thing. Yeah.
There's positives and negatives, but I wonder, thinking with my kind of business degree hat on, what business are we in? Are we in the music business or are we in the entertainment business? So if you're in the music business, you've got a certain amount of choices. But if you're in the entertainment business, you got way, way more choices. So,
good point.
So then you've got to think, well, if that's what I'm competing with, and I need to, and I want to compete, and I want to make this happen, then it's just a different perspective, I think.
Absolutely. So, Braggy, let's go to part 3.
Okay.
And
the 1967 album Branded Man, recorded by my band The Strangers, kicked off an artistically and commercially successful run for me. The following year, I released the album Sing Me Back Home and The Legend of Bonnie and Clyde, regarded as some of the finest country albums of their respective years. My new recordings showcased my band's talents, including Roy Nichols' Telecaster, Ralph Mooney's steel guitar, and the harmony vocals of Bonnie Owens. More number one hits in '69 like Mama Tried, Hungry Eyes, and Okie from Muskogee cemented my reputation as a giant of the country music genre. In later years, I collaborated with other music legends like Willie Nelson, George Jones. In 2006, I was awarded a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. In 2010, I accepted the Kennedy Center honor for outstanding contribution to American culture. In 2023, 7 years after my death, Rolling Stone magazine ranked me number 38 in its list of the 200 greatest singers of all time. My name is... Go, boys.
Oh, can I say it now?
Yeah, say it now.
I was actually lucky enough to sit side of stage at the Myer Sydney Music Bowl.
Yeah.
While this fellow was in Australia, one of the few times he came out to Australia, and I was sitting beside James Gillard, and I can't remember what song it was, but he got to this section in the song and he sang these couple of notes and he just did this little vibrato warble, and both James and I shivered at the same time because it was just this incredible moment of Merle Haggard singing, and we were right there, So
yeah.
Amazing.
It's funny. When I do these, guys, I just put whoever the artist is on, I put them on and listen to it. And I love country, but I never really get into a lot of. I don't go deep, and especially with like Merle Haggard. But wow, what a voice! And one interesting little thing I read about it today was that when he got out of prison and he started to become famous, he was terrified of going on tour and playing live because he thought someone in the third row was going to go, "Hey, that's number 50624 from fucking San Quentin,"
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So what an amazing guy. There you go, Curly. Merle Haggard. Have you listened to him?
Merle Haggard, I had no idea, and no, I haven't listened to him. So, guys, we need to start closing it down. We're getting close to kickoff time.
Okay.
I've just got one question, and it's something that Braggy raised pre-recording tonight. The Faceless Men. So, Brendan, share a little bit about the Faceless Men, and then we'll start the wind down.
I love that you asked about the Faceless Men. The Faceless Men. So, let's go back to the beginning. I was doing a gig with a guy called Adam Harvey before anyone kind of really knew about him. It was in West Leagues Club in Tamworth during the festival. there was a guy called Matt Fell that I'd hired to play bass. And anyone who knows country music knows that Matt Fell's won 150 golden guitars over the last 10 years for Producer of the Year and various things. Matt's now living in Tasmania. And Glenn Wilson, who is an incredible drummer, has played on lots of records, and he's often in the pit in Sydney and in the musicals and stuff. So we're playing in this band in Tamworth, in West Leagues Club, and this guy, Glenn Hanna, comes up to me, and Glenn was playing in Adam Brand's band, I think, at the time, and we just got chatting. I didn't really know Glenn at the time, and we've lost Glenn, dear Glenn. He's no longer with us, but he said, "You and I should put a band together sometime." Now, this is like years ago, and I said, that'd be a great thing to do. And it took many, many years, but so we went through and ended up, I played with James Gillard in Lee Koenigs's band, as I said, and James and I are great, great friends. And I also got to play, Steve Fernley was the drummer in Gina Jeffrey's band when I went down to Sydney. And Steve and I ended up great mates, and we just all love the way each other plays. And somehow or other, at some stage, we all got together and said, hey, let's just put a band together and just play music that we want to play. So it doesn't have to be hits. It doesn't have to be, but it's not about playing, it's not about, it'd be nice if people enjoy it. That'd be a bonus, but let's just play music because we love it. And so that's what we did. And then we did a few gigs around the place. Mostly it was kind of Tamworth Festival. We'd kind of have a hole here and there between the other things we were doing, because you go down normally for a week or 10 days. And so it sort of started there gig-wise, and then we did a few other things. We ended up doing gigs at the Gympie Mustard during that festival. And then we said, look, we really need to record something. And we hadn't written anything together. It was the same as, what we said about the band. Well, let's just choose a whole bunch of songs that we really love and let's record those. And then Glenn said, I think it was probably Glenn, I guess. It's like, well, let's get some people to guest on it because we play with all these people. So we end up with this album with all these great songs on it. And we've got guys like Brian Cadd, and we've got guys like Shane Nicholson, and we've got Casey Chambers singing, and we got, beautiful.
I really enjoyed listening to that this afternoon.
Yeah,
the Faceless Men, it's killer.
The problem with it is, what we decided with it was we didn't want to make any money out of it, so we ordered, I don't know, a few thousand copies, and we sold them at gigs. And once we covered our costs, which they were minimal because we didn't pay ourselves anything, we just had to pay for studio time. We used Rancom Studios in Sydney. Ted Howard, the engineer, who's engineered 1 million records for just about every Australian country record that you would have heard, over the last 30 years. Ted's had something to do with. And we decided that we would donate that money to Support Act, which is Support Act is there to support, basically musicians that have fallen on hard times or whatever. And I personally know some people that have really relied on that from time to time. They've had high times, but then low times. And so and part of the thing was that we didn't want to put it online and make it online. So, we wanted all the money to go to Support Act. But the downside of that is that it limits your audience. And so there's none of those albums left anymore. They're all sold. But we've got the masters, and although Glenn's no longer with us, James and Steve and I still catch up regularly. Actually, we did some recording together just recently. And there's probably still a conversation to be had there about, what do we do with this? Because it's such a
sharing
great piece
it
of
with
music.
the world.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And actually, making some money out of that for Support Act on a larger scale, So
absolutely.
Anyway, I think Brian Cadd's got something to do with Support Act, and I've just played on 5 tracks for a new record for him, and we're back in the studio in 2 weeks to finish that record off. So you've reminded me, I probably need to have a conversation there. Yeah.
Well, Brendan, it has been an absolute joy having you on the show. I know it's been a real kick for myself, and I'm sure I speak for Braggy and Rossi as well, to talk to someone with your experience. We will add Snow to our Unfiltered and Undiscovered playlist on Spotify. Because I was looking before, it is on Spotify, so we're right to do that.
Yeah.
Wherever you've listened or watched this episode, please like, subscribe, leave a review. You know the drum. We're on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. We've got a website, unfilteredandundiscovered.com. As always, check out our playlist. And lyrics from the playlist this week comes from Wolf Darling out of Boston. Remember this that interview, Braggy? That was classic. The song's called Ghost Empire, and the lyrics are very simple. There's a place for ghosts like me. Thank you very much, Brendan. Thanks, Braggy. Thanks, Rossi. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And we will see you all again next week, where we're continuing the country music. We've got a young lady called Josie, one word, Josie. She's just released her new single, her first single, I think it's called Down Under. And we're looking forward to catching up with Josie. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.
I can see the Mitchell grass blowing in the breeze, and I remember breaking down the mulga for the cattle to feed, catching yellow belly, stick a gidgee and some string, sitting on the riverbank, listening to the bullin' sing. Big Jim was a ganger on the Queensland Railway, and he always had too much to do, but never much to say. And every day he'd grab that Gladstone bag and make his way off down the track. And every afternoon I'd sit and wait for him to come back. Back to Kangoola Station, that's where I belong. Kangoola Station, that's my home.